yes, oh yes, oh yes. We are back with another hot topic, something that we covered last week, and I had no idea that the Most High was going to reveal to us a topic that we just covered on last week, and that is Vivek and his racism towards Black Americans. But little did he know, when he brought a particular guest to his show, that she was going to quickly bring him back into reality. So without further ado, let's get into it.
There is a difference in how American you really are depending on how long you've been here. And I think that we ought to smoke that discussion out and have that open dialogue in a way that's been uncomfortable because of the Overton window that we accept around these topics. And I think we would be best served taking a truck and driving it through that Overton window so we can actually have an honest discussion about the future of where the conservative movement is headed from here, not just on the issue of national identity or nationalism or immigration, but more broadly. And that's why I brought on today somebody who I think has some thoughtful perspectives on the future direction of our country, of our conservative movement, and on this question of nationalism and national identity, somebody I've been fascinated by for a long time and have interacted with on social media, but for the first time we're having a at least live form conversation in the offline sense of it. It's Ann Coulter. So Ann, thanks for coming on, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Me too. Thanks for having me. That was a fantastic opening monologue. I too am a fan of yours. I'm going to make a point of disagreeing with you so that it will be fun. You are so bright and articulate, and I guess I can call you articulate since you're not an American Black. Can't say that about them. That's derogatory. And that was a great opening segment. Lots of things to talk about there. Oh, and I agreed with many, many things you said during. In fact, probably more than most other candidates when you're running for president. But I still would not have voted for you because you're an Indian. We'll get back to that.
So she said, I would not have voted for you because you are an Indian. Now, most people would say that that's racist, and I can see how that could be portrayed as that. I can see that. However, she had a point, and I agree with her in this statement. And you have to watch the whole interview in order to get the full context of it. But because of time, we just did different snippets of this interview. But I agree with her because I believe that you have to have some type of backing. You have to have some type of work that you have put into the United States, not just coming over and excited because you have finally reached America and I'm going to do everything I can in order to fit in with the majority. I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to study hard. I'm going to make my mom and dad proud, and I am going to be the greatest American of all time. That's what he thought until she just popped his little bubble. Bless your heart. Bless your heart. She hurt your feelings. I know she did. Because you're fascinated, like you just mentioned, with her. And she let you know that you would not, sir, you would not fit into her choice of president. And again, like I said, I agree. I believe that you should have some type of heritage, something that your forefathers put work into. I believe that the only people who should really qualify to be president are the Native Americans, Blacks, and whites. Those who were not only born in this country, but who forefathers had a great deal to do with the construct of this country. You could tell by his facial expressions that he got cut down very fast. His little ego got from this big all the way down because he wants to fit in so bad. So let's go on to hear him knocking at the door saying, let me in, let me in. And she's saying, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin.
I wouldn't say lose you, but I may fail to fully understand you, is on that axis of citizenship, what does ethnicity have to do with the matter? And I think you would be well served and maybe this could be a great platform for you to do it, to make the case for why that, what you put it, WASP basis for the American identity, how is that relevant against a backdrop of which you got the WASP seventh generation descendant of some rich guy on the Upper East Side in Brooklyn that pretends to hate this country because it's the cool thing to do, versus somebody who came here as the kid of immigrants but pledges loyalty to this country? If loyalty was the access for citizenship, aren't you actually committing a bit of a sin?
WASP, just in case you didn't know, stands for White Anglo-Saxon Protestants. That's what it means. So he's basically saying, hey, my parents came over here and they worked hard, and I went to school. I was actually born on this soil, and I went to school here, and I graduated from the Ivy League schools, and I've done everything to prove that I have an allegiance to the United States of America. Vivek, let me holler at you. Come here. I don't care how much he tries to get into this category or this clique, he will never be accepted. He has melanin in his skin. And I don't think it's so much as his skin color with her. Again, you need to be a descendant of those who built this country. He does not have that. He doesn't have generations of people who put down the groundwork for this country. He doesn't have that. So he's basically comparing, saying, okay, you're saying that it should only, presidency should only go to these WASP people, and you have these people who came from the WASP category and seventh generations down the line. These are some of the people that hate the foundation of America. They have a right to hate the foundation of America because their forefathers, Vivek, put in that work. They have a right to have opinions, same as Black Americans have a right to stand up for their rights, and they also have a right to have a say in how this country is moving because they have put in the work. The forefathers of this country have put in the work. You do not qualify. But let's just listen. She'll break it down for you. Come on, Ann.
Reverting back to a conception of citizenship that has nothing to do with loyalty in the first place.
Well, I will say many of those seventh generations WASP I definitely hate. I know we have a lot of really, really bad ones, but like I said, anyone can adopt this. I guess what I just said, if any of your children marry a DAR, I would definitely vote for them for president. It's not so much, it's more, president is different. You have to be natural born, as you know, which, by the way, Ted Cruz is not, basically because of what you were just describing. Where is the loyalty? So ambassadors' children born actually in the United States are not natural born, but that's a total sidebar.
It's actually not a sidebar at all. I mean, the fact that ambassadors' kids born in the United States are not citizens is actually an overlooked fact. If a kid of an ambassador from Mexico does not enjoy birthright citizenship, neither does somebody who's in this country illegally.
Yes.
Birthright citizenship either, right? So that's actually a quite important logical chain. But I go back to, forget even because you get to this constitutional, legalistic.
Let me in, let's get back to it. Why won't you let me in, Ann? Let me in. Silly rabbit. Tricks are for kids.
And I like that stuff, but we'll just put that to one side for a second. But the essence of American identity, I think there's a part of you that believes, I think you basically said so, that part of that identity is tied to a certain Anglo-Saxon heritage of this country, and that you're more American if you vested into that over the course of generations that are descended from that, rather than somebody who came here with a civic commitment to the country, went through the naturalization process, and then their kids.
Me and my family, we came here, we're showing you, and we've showed you just how American we can be, just how loyal we can be, just how vested we can be in the morals and social construct of this country. We're showing you, we've shown you, I've done the work. Let me in, Ann, let me in. Silly.
I mean, some real sense of the word, and the reason I respect you is that you actually have the, so to speak, the stones to be able to say it, is that you think that there's a difference in the status of the Americanness of that person. And that's where I think I disagree with you, but I want to give you the opportunity to air the case for that strand of national identity that I think we ought to just smoke out and be able to have a discussion about.
Well, the reason I mentioned the natural born citizen is I'm only talking about President of the United States, something totally, totally different. I want to go back to Teddy Kennedy's 1965 Act rules, where, as I've said many times, so sorry if I'm boring you at this point, pre-1965 immigrants were so much better than we are. We ought to be bringing in people. I mean, immigration is just a government policy like any other taxes or, import, export fees. It's just a government policy. It ought to be used to help the people already here. So I keep saying we ought to be getting our average up. Let's bring in people better than us. And that's what it actually kicked in around 1970. So pre-1970 immigrants were better educated, made more money, bought more houses. Oh my gosh, did that change after Teddy Kennedy's Immigration Act? Now 9% of, as Trump says, legal immigrants are from the third world. There isn't that much difference between legal and illegal in terms of the cultures they're coming from. And why is that? Because at the same time, the 1965 immigration passed, we also got LBJ's Great Society programs. So if you came here basically at any point from, 1632 up until 1965, if you couldn't make it, you went home or you starved to death. There was no warm bath of welfare benefits that you would be sunk into. And most people don't know this, but about 30% of the prized Ellis Island immigrants went home. 60% of Southern Italian immigrants went home. So that's how, without having any laws or having to pick this one or that one, we just naturally got the best the world had to offer. We were skimming the cream. And I think when most people like Trump talk about legal immigrants versus illegal immigrants, that's what they're thinking of. They're thinking of Ellis Island, but really what they mean is pre-1970, post-1970. Now,
and that busts this little bubble, because guess what? If it was left up to her and her certain population, let's just say that, him and his family would not have been chosen to come into the United States of America. They would not have made the list. It's a harsh reality, isn't it, Vivek? That no matter how good you and your people in East India think they are, because they discredit and they really do not like even their own people who are of darker skin. And I covered that in the video on last week, gave you evidence, gave you proof. But his family, according to Ann, would not have been chosen to be those immigrants that came over. She said the Immigration Act of 1965 or before 1965, she said, listen, there were people who came over here to the United States and we didn't have all of these welfare programs for them or ways for them, initiatives for them to come over. When they came over here, either you swim or sink. And she said a number of them from different areas saw that it was too hard to make the transition here in America, and a vast majority of them wound up going back to their homes. We're in a different situation when it comes down to immigration to this day. Different situation. We have open borders, we have open walls, letting everyone in. But the point of the matter is, Vivek and his family, according to their standards, would not have been able to come to the United States. So that's just the reality. Now, he's getting ready to go into his racism. So even though he feels violated because him and his family would not have been considered to be the ideal immigrants to come over here to America, yet and still, he's going to go into who he really is. And that is to bring down black people. So he uses certain descriptive words to basically say black people. He uses location or geography to narrow down exactly who he is talking about with his little racist self. Let's listen.
I have some conviction of this. That was not in any sense of the word any majority or even significant plurality or even significant minority led by immigrants. I mean, these are self-hating people who have been in this country for generations, whether they're of black or white skin. The BLM riots in this country in the middle of COVID-infested America, COVID policy-infested America, really, in 2020, was really something that has very little to do with illegal migration or even legal migration, but something else of a national self-loathing that exists in this country. And even when I visited the south side of Chicago, and this is where I went to interface with people who don't agree with people like you and I, the kind of comments I got there were interesting, which was, these are people who are pushing me on my policies on racial reparations, which I'm dead set against in this country. Maybe there was a time for racial reparations in 1866 or in 1870, a time of Reconstruction, but not the year 2024. That has no place in America. I'm dead set against affirmative action of every kind. And the thing I was told more than once, and not particularly in civil terms, was that this country was built on the back of my ancestors and not yours, which I think is really interesting. It's fascinating. That, I think, was a better representation of what was represented in the violent riots of the post-George Floyd death, BLM riots of 2020. And yet there's an element of that, to me, feels familiar in at least a strain of what underlies your own vision of American identity, too, which is what I think is fascinating and just worth exploring. I don't think that BLM, do you agree with me on the BLM?
He put all the ingredients in the pot. He turned the stove on and he let it simmer. He built up all of these descriptive words. He painted a beautiful picture of Black Lives Matter movement, which I'm not a fan of and I don't agree with, because I know the underlying cause of all of that. It has really nothing to do with black people but other agendas. But he was painting the picture. He said South Chicago. So we know who live in South Chicago. He even said blacks and whites. And we've been in this country for so long, both blacks and whites. We built the country. He said all that to say, but these people have hate for the country, or these people are loathing, meaning that we won't let go of slavery. And we won't condition, and we'll let slavery bypass. We won't bring it up so much, and that's reparations. And you've already said that you don't support that, so I guess you're going to have to continue to hear our mouths about it. But anyway, for black and white people, we have the right to express our opinion, because guess what? Our forefathers built this country and constructed this country from generation to generation. We've heard of the stories that has been passed on throughout the generations. And we have a right as descendants of these people to express our concerns and our opinions. And you, dear sir, my East Indian friend, you don't have that right, because you don't have any history in this country, you and your family. You don't have any history. But he thought that she was going to agree with him. But let's take a listen. I love it so. I love it.
BLM piece. The
No.
summer of 2020 was not immigrants. So you don't agree with me even on that?
Well,
No,
I
she
would
don't.
never have said it was particularly immigrants, but
Yeah.
there were two different groups. First, you had the, and I think it would often go Antifa, i.e. mentally ill white people, some immigrants. Actually, there were a fair number of immigrants, by the way. I don't know about the
You might be right about that. I just give you my
but
impression.
they are definitely.
He gave her his perception. He assumed. And she bust his bubble right then and there. His racism came out just as clear as day. And she bust his little bubble again and said, no, there were immigrants out there too. There were immigrants out there. There were white people. There were black people. So now what, Vivek? He just again, he showed us who he really is. He is a racist. It's built in his country. It's built in his DNA. His parents were racist. If you don't believe me, go back to the video that I did just 7 days ago, not even 7 days ago. And it talks about the culture of India, how they frown upon people of darker descent, even though they are brown. But I'm talking about those who are like 2 or 3 shades darker than I am. They treat their own people who are of that type of complexion, they treat them like trash. Please go back and view that. And that's why we do have to be careful of who we are letting inside of our country. We have a right to complain as Black Americans. We have a right to our opinion. White people have a right to their opinion. in America. They have a right to say whatever they want to say. Just like black people, we can say whatever we want to say. And we don't need other groups coming in telling us what we can and cannot say, because that's a part of our constitutional right. Now, we're not just citizens. We're descendants of forefathers. I'm sorry. Go back to India if you want to. Go. But wrapping up this video, I want to close with this. Listen to what she said about black Americans.
Human rights are not civil rights?
No, I think civil rights are for blacks.
See, this is essentially the problem, and the Republicans
What have we done to the immigrants? We owe black people something. We have a legacy of slavery. Immigrants haven't even been in this country.
But you see, most of us are either immigrants or are the descendants of immigrants, and we understand that not everybody, there are Native Americans in, but we understand in this country, that kind of self-deportation, making things so difficult for immigrants, for undocumented immigrants, that they have to leave, or the DREAM Act, threatening to veto the DREAM Act, which is what Romney has said. I mean, and again, we have Governor Romney, who is basically taking a position that is anti a large and the fastest growing segment of the electorate.
You heard her say, she said, we owe black people. The civil rights had everything to do with black people. She said, we owe black people. But Vivek doesn't think so. But she specifically said, we owe black people. And that goes back to the 1965 or pre-1965 Immigration Act, to where if you came into this country and you couldn't make it in this country, you were shipped home. You were shipped out. You were gone bye-bye. But now we have welfare acts that help support immigrants. And now we're in a situation, 2024, where we are helping people who are crossing the border illegally. We're financing that. When she mentioned the Civil Rights Act and what is owed to black people, look at all the groups that fit in underneath the umbrella of the Civil Rights Act now. Gays and the LGBTQRSTLUV, that community have more rights under the Civil Rights Act than black people. Asians have more rights under the Civil Rights Act than black people. Women have more rights than black people. However, the civil rights was created by and for black Americans, descendants of slaves. If you like what you have heard, you already know what to do. Like, share, and subscribe. Comment below, and I will see you in the next video. May God bless.